Does God, in fact, influence the decisions you make here at the Capitol?
Yes. Because I guess let me start out by saying that as a legislator, people choose me not because I mirror them, but because there's something that they see in me that they believe would give me insight and wisdom to make good choices for them. Whether that is my demonstrations of faith, my education as a physician, my personality, my tenacity, if you will, willingness to take on hard challenges, or that they believe I would, a passion on some issue that I believe. They choose me to make decisions that will affect their life. So, at the heart of every aspect of my personality is the Lord. It's my belief in Jesus Christ, and that cannot be separated. It's that my belief, my faith in the Lord that molds my personality, that gives me the mindset to make right choices, and the courage to stand for some hard choices.
What specific issues have you turned to your faith for the answer?
It serves as a litmus test that comes naturally for anything I take on, any legislative piece that I look at. It's not something I'm seeking, honing in on, but my faith is what, as I said, molds my personality, that gives me an unyielding stance so that I don't compromise. I believe we have to govern with compassion, but with wisdom. So when you're asking me about maybe one piece that I looked at, perhaps Senate Bill 1819, 14 hours of hearing, because I wanted to put an end to taxpayer subsidy for higher education of illegals, of undocumented people, yet taxpayer dollars are going, as we speak, in benefits and grants to those, again, who are here illegally to go to college. My bill would have stopped the taxpayer subsidies, but not stop their education. Simply ask that any student going to college, if they are not a legal citizen of Texas, that they pay out-of-state tuition like any citizen of the United States of the other 49 states. That was hard in that I faced a lot of controversy because people thought I was not compassionate to try to stop them getting the benefits that should be reserved for Texans if I wanted to take that away. But I believe that I am elected, and all the people elected in the legislature should be guardians of the taxpayer dollars. And governing with compassion but wisdom says this is not sustainable. It's also not right. We spend millions of dollars to try to beef up protection on the border, yet we pay millions in benefits that people get to be here illegally. And that's not good governance. It's not a consistency of governance. So what is the right thing to do? Make sure taxpayer dollars are spent wisely. What seemed to be an uncompassionate thing was to stop the taxpayer subsidy for illegals. It was easy to bring the bill up because I feel like I am held to what people elected me to do. And if I am not using my job wisely, then I'm compromising. And part of my personality, again, is molded on my belief in the Lord. So I am to do what I said I would do, keep my word. And so that's probably a good example of where it was a hard choice, the right choice, had to stand courage under fire, if you will. So that's probably an example.
Let me pause real quick. What is that clicking?
I don't.
Those are the lights.
Oh, the lights.
Cooling off.
Okay.
As they cool.
Oh, okay.
Right.
That makes sense. Just was asking.
Yeah, I don't know. I was hearing it too, and I thought I was.
It's
It's
a
a
state
gymnasium
word.
thing where you turn the light
Yeah.
on for like the next 2 hours.
Okay.
I didn't not been here when the lights have been out.
You mentioned.
Talk about the Jason 5 Act.
Oh, okay.
You mentioned compromise a couple times. Is it an all or nothing thing? I mean, you have, when we're talking about faith in particular, and you're a member of a body of 31
Yes.
people with different faiths or different views on different things, how do you mitigate that, your faith with, your duty to legislate?
Mm-hmm. There's still not a compromise if the litmus test of something that doesn't jive with my personality, again, which is molded by my belief in the Lord. There's not a compromise there. There can be negotiation to try to arrive at the end result, knowing that we can make a first down, if you will, and maintain possession of the ball. Not let perfect be the enemy of good. So there's negotiations when you work across the aisle, if you will. But God doesn't see Republican or Democrat. He's laid out in the Bible laws that are good for all people. And that's not a partisan thing. That's not something to compromise on. It's something to work toward. So I have not found a conflict in my votes that have compromised my belief in any way.
You mentioned before we started the issue of pro-life and abortion. You come to the table, I think, with an interesting perspective, given that you are an ER doc, and I'm sure have seen a lot in your career.
Yes.
How does that factor into that decision? I mean, again, being a woman too, and just how do you mitigate that? Being maybe pro-life but women's choice. I don't know.
It's not difficult because being a physician, setting that aside, being a woman, setting that aside, we have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I believe any society that does not respect life is destined for failure. God creates life. He means for us to sustain it until natural death. Animals do not kill their young, but America does. That is not something that is negotiable. Being a physician, I have seen rarity, but where a mother's life has to be chosen over a baby's life. That's usually very early in a pregnancy. So that is not difficult. We have the right to pursue life and happiness, but we don't have the right to destroy life. So that's just, it's not a hard subject. It's not a compromise. I believe a choice are things that you do as a behavior. But to end a life because you're not ready for it, or it's an unwanted pregnancy for any reason, is not a reason to kill a baby. it can easily be a reason to give the child up. And there are many people out there willing to accept a baby in adoption. We even had a bill that was called the Baby Moses Bill, which basically is an expansion of what we already have, but it allows, if a parent doesn't feel they can parent the child, they don't want to keep the baby, they can take the baby to a freestanding emergency center or an ambulatory surgery center, no questions asked, and just give the baby there. So it's a Baby Moses Act that we had in that past. So life and defense of life is easy for me.
You mentioned the rare occasion where a mother's life is going to be in danger if she continues a pregnancy. When do you see life beginning? Is it conception?
Yes.
So
Yes.
why is it easier in an earlier pregnancy if at conception that's a life?
It's not, I'm saying that when the mother's life is on the line, imminent death, it's not usually very late in the pregnancy, that they couldn't induce labor and still have a viable, healthy baby. That's what I mean with that.
I just wanted to clarify.
Yes. No, life begins at conception. And, you know, if you think about it, society defines life at conception. If you look at the law, meaning lawyers they have suits all the time against physicians that gave a medicine in the first trimester. And an outcome, they may say there's a cause and effect, a bad outcome, because a doctor prescribed a medication in the first trimester. So that case would not be won if the law didn't recognize life at conception. Otherwise, an attorney could not win a case against a physician until at some stage we define life. Yet in the same day, the same court, the same attorney may be defending the right for a mother to kill the baby, an abortion, with nothing at any trimester, at any period. Yet earlier in the day, a doctor be found guilty for something unknowingly may have caused harm in the developing baby. So if you look at our court system, you know, it's speaking out of both sides of the mouth.
Were you in support of getting rid of the exception for fetal abnormality?
Yes.
You were. You know, you mentioned that a woman could give up the baby, but if that child is confirmed to have a, fetal abnormality, how do you mitigate that with your faith as far as, telling that woman, that she has to have the child and what that life will be like?
That's not my choice. You're asking me, do I believe where life starts? It starts at conception. God created the baby, and there are, times when the baby's not formed perfectly. And that if the baby cannot survive, unfortunately, then the baby dies. There are a lot of funds out there, and we take care of a lot of babies that have severe birth defects. So it would be great, and there's a lot of dollars put into research to try and minimize the number of birth defects that we have. And I am in support of research dollars for trying to stop the birth defects that we have.
You mentioned also life to natural death. How do your beliefs then apply to the death penalty?
I believe in capital punishment. Well, that may seem like a conflict, but I believe in the protection of innocent life. When a person has been found guilty of a capital crime, that is not protecting innocent life. They are no longer innocent. But I believe in the protection of innocent life. I believe in capital punishment because that is not protection of innocent life.
But we know the justice system isn't perfect. So
It is not.
how do you feel, or you or others feel completely sure that the person who was found guilty actually did it? Or
That's up to the lawyers. Good is that in the cutting edge of technology that we have here, there is more and more ability to really try to get someone, if they are accused and convicted, that there's actual proof to back that up. I think we see instances all the time where the death penalty is either postponed and it takes so many years when you have a capital punishment sentence before they're even killed. And so I believe with the cutting edge technology that we have, there's a lot of way to get supporting evidence for whether they're guilty or not. So
one issue at the forefront, especially in recent weeks, is same-sex marriage, and there were several attempts this session to further restrict or limit that, pending the Supreme Court's decision. How do your views or your faith influence your views of same-sex marriage?
yes. Same-sex marriage is a behavior that is not condoned in the Bible. Marriage is defined, and Texas overwhelmingly has voted for marriage as defined between one natural man and one natural woman. And a decision by 5 lawyers in a robe with a stroke of a pen to redefine marriage doesn't redefine it. It may change a law, but it doesn't change the belief for those of us who still believe that marriage is between a man and a woman. So people can change a definition, and with this, a whole lot of dominoes fell so far as benefits or perks that come with defined marriage. But what didn't change is what the true definition to those of us who, with our faith, believe that marriage is between a man and a woman, and it always will be. That's how God set up the hierarchy of the family, and even the analogy between Christ and the body of Christ is the groom and a bride. So that, while I can't change that, where we go forward is religious freedom, the protection of religious freedom. Because the First Amendment allows protection of our religious beliefs. And what can't be allowed is someone taking what they condone as right in a behavior and forcing someone else to be tolerant and accept that behavior. That's not their right. So I think that they were misguided. I do not think that decision rendered was based on a constitutional basis. So it's a behavior that is in direct conflict with my beliefs. It doesn't mean I don't like people, because that's part of my personality also. We like everybody, nobody's perfect. And so we still like people, we still defend an individual's right. But that doesn't mean we have to defend a behavior or condone a behavior. But God tells us to love everyone, and that's what we should strive for. But it doesn't mean we love every behavior.
This session we heard, of course, there was a big focus on guns and to successfully open carry, campus carry passed. I remember you on the Senate floor talking about that. I think there was an amendment, or you weren't for, I think, the Huffines amendment that basically would have made it constitutional carry. We did hear the authors talk about it, that it's a God-given right. Are you in that camp? Do you believe that carrying a weapon a gun in particular is a God-given right?
It's a constitutional right in our Second Amendment. Again, God creates life. I do believe we have the right to defend that. And a gun is an amendment right. We have to have a way to defend ourselves. When you look at crime, the criminals carry a gun constitutionally. Well, illegally, really, if they plan to do harm with it. But, you know, we have laws that try to make sure people have safety and have a background check, that, you know, so that we have some type of check and balance on who carries. But truly, the Second Amendment doesn't require a license, courses, or anything like that. So I am for the ability to carry. When we talked about legislation and trying to negotiate, I don't want to see our gun rights stifled in any way. So I'm for open carry. And I was concerned that the Huffines Amendment might stop what we already had the momentum for. So that was the primary impetus for my opposition to that amendment. I think he means well. And again, the Constitution defines constitutional carry, which, you know. But I didn't want to stop the momentum that we had to, again, belt and suspender our right to carry in Texas.
And finally, on education, you mentioned poverty before. How does that play in, for instance, on you know, pre-K this session? You know,
Yes.
The President of the Senate, his advisory council, called Abbott's plan a godless environment. How do you view pre-K as far as the state's role in mitigating that?
I thought the governor brought forth and asked me to carry good legislation regarding pre-K. Let me tell you why. Currently, around $750 million a year goes out to pre-K with no accountability. We're not asking for any of those dollars to have accountability associated with them. So what the bill did was added an extra $60 million per year. And that's not chump change. But we're not going to get the genie of pre-K back in the bottle. That's out. Pre-K is there, and it's there to stay. But we're not measuring any effects, and yet we're putting out $750 million a year without knowing whether or not it's really of value. Does that sound like a conservative thing to do? No. So what Governor Abbott asked, and those that voted for it, is, yes, let's start putting some quality measures in there, measure and see if we're really doing well, support first, second, third grade up through fourth, to see if we're really making a difference with pre-K dollars. If not, then we have to go back to the drawing board, and maybe we need to pull dollars back. But what my bill did was added $60 million per year and required some quality, performance, if you will. And that is conservative. And that is going to help, I believe. And we measure it. If it doesn't work, the dollars come off. But I believe if we're going to spend $750 million per year, we have a responsibility, again, guardian of the taxpayer dollars, to make sure that $750 million is being spent wisely. So what my bill did was added pre-K dollars that forced quality, and we may have to tweak what we define or how we get to quality. But we needed to do something. Whether you believe in pre-K or not, $750 million going out every year, but there's no accountability, that needed to be checked. And that's what the bill did.
Did your children attend pre-K?
Yes. Well, I've got my older three girls in as they were teenagers. My 9-year-old did attend pre-K, but I paid for it myself. So that was all my doing. I do believe that, and I'm going to slip away from pre-K and go to public ed, a bill that I had that I will bring back and fought hard for, but sometimes it takes a little bit of time to plant that seed and have it come to fruition, was taxpayer savings grant. We spend so much money on public schools, yet the public, the parents, don't have a choice where they get to send their child. They are limited to a public school in their zip code, except for an occasional, if you jump through the hoops, you can get your child moved to a different district. But if you wanted to send your child with taxpayer dollars, you as taxpayer, to a private school because you felt the private school would meet their needs better, you can't. Taxpayer dollars only go to the monopoly of public school. Yet, I believe taxpayer dollars should follow the child to the school of the parent's choice. There's all kinds of benefits. It's a win-win for everybody. That didn't make it, but I'll bring that back.
How does that work though when the school might be so far away? I mean, and there's maybe not, you know, a school bus that's going to go there.
Well, the parents will make that decision. Transportation at this point. The first goal is to get the dollars to follow the child to the school of the parent's choice. But why shouldn't we have that? And again, my bill, it only provided for just a fraction of the dollars. The rest of the dollars stay in the school fund. So it's only a fraction of the dollars that follow the child. But that fraction can augment what a parent can put in to send that child to get, with transportation to get them to a school. Now, many of the schools in the rural areas, there's not an option for miles away. And those parents are not likely to move their child. Some parents move to suburbia because of the school system, and they're willing to drive themselves to their workplace in order to have the child in the school district that is a good school district. And we've got a lot of great public schools. But the point is, one size doesn't fit all when it comes to education. And I believe that's the civil rights issue of the day, education. And if, say, a single parent in an urban community, and there's a private school right down on the block, why shouldn't that mother be able to send her child to that private school? Because she doesn't have the money, or he doesn't have the money? Why can't we allow some of the dollars to follow that child so their child can go to that private school? It's still the parent's option. Nobody forces you to take the money. No one forces you to leave the public school, but it's an option. And when taxpayers pay in to Texas for us to govern with wisdom, compassion, and be the guardian of the taxpayer dollars, why shouldn't we have competition and have the best policies out there to bring up our brightest children, all of our children, give them that bright future? And we can do that. But instead, we force them into a public school and try to make a one-size-fits-all. So that is something that may be defined as a social issue. It's good governance.
Your daughter is 9.
Yes.
So she's going to be coming up into that part, and you have 3 older you mentioned. But what do you think about what she should be learning in the classroom when it comes to sex ed? You know, there's a big debate in the House this session with abstinence only versus sex education. Where do you think, how should she learn about that?
She should learn that from home, from her parents. That is not something that should be passed off to teachers, to a curriculum that is defined by someone who may not have the same beliefs as the parents. And the children should not be exposed to anything before the maturation level that the parents feel is time to talk to their child about. So sex education does not belong in school. Reading, writing, arithmetic, our computer system, languages, critical thinking needs to be in education, not sex education.
Senator, I think we covered a lot. Anything else to add that I didn't hit on when it comes to, again, your faith and the Capitol?
My faith also leads me to stand for things that are righteous and things that are right that we should do. Compassion. I was very pleased, and we worked hard to pass something called the Jason Flatt Act. That provides a mechanism for teachers to learn about suicide in the high school population, high school and junior high population. That's something that we can make a difference in. Again, life. And if we can protect the children, keep them from committing suicide, is that not good governance? Is that not a protection of life? So we got that in, and I was happy about that. And I would just say that at the heart of everything I do is something I don't think about. It's not conscious, but it's what I base my principles on. And my values, my beliefs are rooted in my belief in God, in His Son, Jesus Christ, who died on the cross for our sins and lives today. And for those who don't believe in Jesus, everybody will at some point, while they're alive on earth, or when they die, and it's Judgment Day, they will believe in Jesus. I choose to believe in Him right now.
Senator, well said. Thank you very much.